He didn't expect anything to feel wrong. It was just a birthday, something small, something quiet. But the moment Damon stepped inside his mother's house, a strange weight settled in his chest. The kitchen felt hollow, the air too still, and she smiled too quickly when she saw him. By the time he noticed her counting loose change with trembling hands, he knew something wasn't right, and he couldn't yet explain why. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It started weeks earlier with a phone call he almost ignored. Damon had been halfway through a late shift, juggling delayed shipments and a supervisor who refused to answer his messages when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, saw his mother's name, and nearly let it ring out. She usually called in the evenings, not in the middle of the day. He picked up anyway. "Hey, Mom." Her voice came through thinner than usual. "Hi, sweetheart, I won't keep you. I just wanted to remind you, my birthday's coming up." Damon smiled despite himself. "You don't have to remind me." I know, she said quickly, "just, if you're free." No pressure. Something about the way she rushed the words bothered him. She didn't ask when he'd arrive, didn't mention plans, no jokes about cake, no casual complaints about getting older, just a quiet, almost careful invitation. "I'll be there," he said after a pause. Another pause on her end, then softer, "That would be nice." The call ended before he could ask anything else. At the time, he told himself she was just tired. 2 weeks later, Damon pulled into the familiar driveway in Columbus, Ohio. The house looked the same from the outside, faded siding, the same crooked mailbox, but something felt off before he even stepped out of the car. No lights on, even though it was already getting dark. He grabbed his bag and walked up to the door, knocking once before letting himself in. "Mom?" She appeared from the hallway almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting just out of sight. Her smile came too fast, too wide. "Damon, you made it." He hugged her, noticing how light she felt. "Of course I did." When he pulled back, he studied her face. She looked fine, maybe a little tired, nothing obvious. But the feeling in his chest didn't ease. "I didn't know if you'd be able to get off work," she said. "I figured it out." He glanced around. "You didn't have to keep everything so quiet. I thought you'd at least decorate or something." "Oh, you know me," she said quickly. "I didn't want to make a fuss." He nodded, but his eyes drifted toward the kitchen. The fridge door stood slightly ajar. Inside, there were only a few items: milk, a jar of something, half a loaf of bread, no cake, no groceries waiting for a dinner, nothing that looked like a birthday at all. "You didn't go shopping?" he asked casually. "I did earlier this week," she said, avoiding his eyes. "I just didn't need much." Damon didn't push, not yet. He set his bag down and noticed a stack of envelopes on the counter. Some were opened, some weren't. A few had red markings, final nota, past duty. He picked one up. "Oh, those," she said quickly, stepping closer. "Just some old bills, I haven't sorted them yet." "You want me to take a look?" "No," she said, too sharply. Then softer, your brother's been helping me with all that. It's already handled." Right on cue, the front door opened behind him. "Hey, you made it." Damon turned. His brother stepped inside like he owned the place, keys jangling in his hand. He looked relaxed, confident, like nothing in the world could surprise him. "Yeah," Damon said. "Just got here." His brother nodded toward the counter. "You digging through paperwork already?" "Just saw a few notices." "They're nothing," his brother said, shrugging. "Routine stuff, I've got it under control." Damon studied him for a second. The answer came too easily. "You sure?" he asked. "Positive." His brother walked past him, grabbing a soda from the fridge without hesitation. "You know how it is. Small things pile up. I take care of it so she doesn't have to worry." Damon glanced back at his mother. She gave a small nod, as if confirming it. Everything in that moment should have settled him. There was an explanation, a reasonable one. His brother lived nearby. Of course he handled things. And yet that feeling didn't go away. Later that night, after dinner that didn't quite feel like a celebration, Damon found himself back in the kitchen alone. The house had gone quiet, his mother had gone to bed early, and his brother had stepped out to take a call. The stack of envelopes was still there. He hesitated. Then he picked one up again. Inside was a notice, overdue, with a balance that didn't make sense. He frowned, flipping through the pages. Something about the numbers felt off. Without really thinking about it, he reached for another envelope. This one wasn't a bill. It was a bank statement. He told himself he was just checking, just making sure everything was actually under control. But as he opened it, his eyes caught on the numbers immediately. Withdrawals, not one or two, dozens, small amounts, spread out, repeated. Damon's brow tightened as he flipped the page, then another. The pattern didn't look random, it looked intentional. And for the first time since he walked into the house, the thought hit him clearly: this wasn't a mistake. Damon didn't realize how long he'd been standing there until the refrigerator motor clicked off behind him and the kitchen fell completely silent. He stared at the statement in his hands, flipping back to the first page, then forward again, as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. The withdrawals were small enough to blend in, 40 here, 60 there, sometimes just under 100, but they were consistent, every few days, every week. He leaned against the counter, jaw tightening. This wasn't one mistake, this was a pattern. He folded the paper halfway, then stopped. If he put it back exactly the way it was, maybe no one would know he'd seen it. That thought came too quickly, and it bothered him more than the numbers themselves, because it meant part of him already knew this wasn't something simple. Footsteps creaked down the hallway. Damon slid the statement back into the envelope just as his brother walked in, phone still in hand. "You still up?" his brother asked casually, glancing at the counter. "Yeah." "Couldn't sleep." His brother nodded, setting his phone down. "Long drive'll do that." Damon watched him open the fridge, grab another drink, same as before. Comfortable, unbothered, like nothing in this house required explanation. "You've been handling all her bills?" Damon asked, keeping his voice even. His brother didn't hesitate. "Yeah." "Why? Just wondering how it's set up." "What do you mean? Like automatic payments? Or are you doing it manually?" His brother shrugged. "A mix. Some auto, some I just take care of. Depends on the account." Damon nodded slowly, as if that was enough. "It wasn't. Everything's covered?" he asked. "Yeah." His brother took a sip. "Why wouldn't it be?" Damon held his gaze for a second, too long, no reason. The answer hung there, thin and unfinished. His brother didn't push it. He just nodded once and walked past him, like the conversation had already ended. But it hadn't. Not for Damon. Later, in the small guest room, Damon sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in his lap. He hadn't turned on the light. The dim glow from the street outside was enough. He pulled the statement out again. This time he slowed down. He traced each withdrawal with his finger, one by one, reading the dates, the amounts. A rhythm began to form in his head. Not random, not scattered, deliberate, every few days. Sometimes lined up with weekends. Sometimes just before the middle of the month. He frowned and reached for his phone, opening his calendar. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for yet, but something told him to check. He started matching dates. A few lined up with nothing obvious. But then he noticed one, a withdrawal on a Friday evening. He scrolled back through his messages. That was the same night his brother had texted him, complaining about car repairs. Said it cost more than expected. Damon's stomach tightened. He flipped to another page. Another withdrawal 2 days later. That was the weekend his brother had posted photos online. New furniture. A finally upgraded caption. Damon stared at the screen, then back at the paper. It could still be coincidence. It had to be coincidence. But the longer he looked, the harder it became to believe that. He sat there for a long time, piecing together fragments, dates, amounts, small details he hadn't paid attention to before. And slowly, something began to take shape. This wasn't just money disappearing. It was money moving, with purpose. What Damon found would change everything, he muttered under his breath, the words sounding strange even to him. He leaned back against the wall, running a hand over his face. There was an easier way to handle this. He could walk into the kitchen tomorrow morning, ask a few direct questions, get a quick answer, accept whatever explanation came, let it go. That would be easier, cleaner. But it would also mean ignoring what was right in front of him. He looked down at the statement again. "I should have checked. I didn't," he whispered. The realization hit harder than he expected. He hadn't been completely absent, he called. He visited when he could. He asked if things were okay, but he never verified. He trusted that someone else was handling it, and now he wasn't sure who that someone else really was. The next morning, Damon got up earlier than usual. The house was quiet again. His mother was still asleep, and his brother hadn't come back down yet. Damon moved carefully, trying not to make noise as he stepped into the kitchen. The stack of mail was still there. This time he didn't hesitate. He sorted through it quickly, pulling out anything with a financial heading. Bills, notices, statements. Some were unopened. Others had been opened and shoved back in without being organized. He found another bank envelope, different account. His pulse picked up slightly as he opened it. Same pattern. Smaller withdrawals, but just as frequent, just as consistent. He flipped through the pages faster this time, not needing to convince himself anymore. This wasn't isolated. It was happening across accounts, across months. Damon exhaled slowly, setting the papers down in front of him. His hands were steady now, but his chest felt tight. Footsteps sounded behind him again. He didn't turn this time. "You're up early," his brother said. Damon kept his eyes on the papers. "Yeah," a pause. "Then, you going through that stuff again?" Damon picked up one of the statements, turning it so his brother could see. "These withdrawals," he said. "What are they for?" His brother stepped closer, glanced down briefly, then shrugged. "Like I said, expenses, groceries, gas, whatever comes up every few days. Things come up every few days." Damon looked up at him now. From both accounts, his brother's expression didn't change. "Yeah." Why? Damon held his gaze. "Because they line up with your spending." For the first time, something flickered across his brother's face. It was subtle, quick, but it was there. Then it disappeared. "You're overthinking it," his brother said, voice still calm. "I've been taking care of her for years. You think I don't deserve a little back for that?" The words landed heavier than expected. Not denial, justification. Damon felt something shift inside him. "So you are taking it," he said quietly. "I'm handling things," his brother replied. "There's a difference." Damon stared at him, the gap between those two statements widening with every second. Behind them, a door creaked open down the hallway. Their mother's voice followed, soft and uncertain. "What are you two talking about?" Damon didn't answer right away. He looked down at the statements one more time, then back at his brother. And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just about money anymore. Because if this was what his brother was willing to admit, what else hadn't he? Their mother stood in the hallway, one hand resting against the wall as if she needed the support. She looked between them, her eyes moving slowly, trying to read a conversation she had clearly walked into too late. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Damon felt the weight of the papers in his hand. For a second he considered folding them back up, saying it was nothing, letting the moment pass. That would have been easier. "We're just talking about the accounts," he said instead, keeping his voice steady. Her expression tightened slightly. "Oh, your brother handles those, I know," Damon said. "I just wanted to understand how." His brother stepped in smoothly before she could answer. "Like I told you, it's under control. There's no reason to stress her out over details." "I'm not trying to stress anyone out," Damon replied. "I'm asking basic questions." "You're asking questions that don't matter," his brother said, sharper now. "Everything's paid. She's fine." Damon turned fully toward him. "She's not fine." The words landed harder than he expected. Their mother flinched slightly, like she'd just been pulled into something she didn't want to be part of. "I am fine," she said quickly, almost automatically. Damon softened his tone. "Mom, when was the last time you looked at your bank account?" She hesitated. That was enough. "I don't need to," she said after a moment. "He takes care of it." Damon nodded slowly, absorbing that, not arguing, just letting it settle between them. "Do you know how much is in it?" he asked. Another pause. His brother let out a short breath, stepping closer. "Okay, this is getting ridiculous. She doesn't need to track every dollar. That's the whole point of me helping." "Helping," Damon repeated. "Yeah," his brother said, "helping, because I'm here, because I'm the one who actually shows up." The shift in tone was subtle, but it was there now, defensive, edged with something sharper underneath. Damon didn't react immediately, he just studied him. "You think this is about showing up?" Damon asked quietly. "What do you think it's about?" His brother shot back. Damon looked down at the statements again, then back up. "I think you've been taking money." The room went still. Their mother's hand tightened against the wall. "Damon, it's not like that," his brother said quickly, but the calm in his voice had cracked. "Then explain it," Damon said. "I just did." "No, you didn't." His brother's jaw tightened. "I've been covering things, expenses, things she doesn't even realize she needs. You think groceries just appear?" You think bills pay themselves? Damon shook his head. That's not what I'm seeing. Then you're not looking at the full picture. Then show me the full picture, Damon said. For a second, it looked like his brother might say something else, might push back harder, but instead, he exhaled and looked away. I don't need to prove anything to you, he said. Damon felt something settle into place, not certainty, but direction, because if there was nothing to hide, there wouldn't be resistance like this. Their mother spoke again, quieter now. Can we just not do this right now? Damon turned to her. The last thing he wanted was to put her in the middle of it, but she was already there. I'm not trying to start a fight, he said gently. I just want to make sure everything's okay. It is okay, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. His brother stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. It is. Don't worry about it. The gesture looked protective, but Damon couldn't shake the feeling that it was something else, control. The word came to him uninvited, and once it did, it was hard to unsee. He didn't push further, not in that moment, not with her standing there caught between them. Instead, he set the papers down slowly. Fine, he said. We'll talk later. His brother gave a short nod as if that settled it, but it didn't, not even close. The rest of the day passed in a strange, strained version of normal. They sat together for lunch, talked about small things, avoided anything that mattered. Damon watched everything more closely now. The way his mother deferred before answering simple questions. The way his brother answered for her without thinking. The way she glanced toward him just for a second before agreeing. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, which made it worse. That evening, while his brother was out again, Damon made a decision. He went back to the kitchen, gathered the statements he'd already seen, and slipped them into his bag. Then he found his phone and started taking pictures of the rest. He moved quickly but carefully, making sure everything went back exactly where it had been. This wasn't enough yet, but it was something. Later, sitting alone in the car parked down the street, Damon opened the photos and started organizing them. Dates, amounts, accounts. He created a simple list. At first it looked messy, random numbers, scattered entries, but as he added more, a pattern started to emerge again. Clearer this time, more defined. He leaned back in the seat, staring at the screen. This wasn't just spending, it was tracking. Whoever was doing this knew exactly how much to take without triggering alarms. Not too much at once, not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to add up over time. Damon's chest tightened. He was taking money little by little, he said quietly. The words felt heavier now, because they weren't a theory anymore. They were a conclusion. Still, something didn't sit right. If it was just money, his brother would have denied it outright. Deflected harder, shut the conversation down completely. But he hadn't, he'd justified it. Which meant, in Ima's mind, it wasn't just theft, it was something he believed he was entitled to. Damon stared at the screen a little longer, then scrolled further down. That's when he saw it. A withdrawal that didn't fit, larger than the rest. Not by a massive amount, but enough to stand out. It wasn't part of the pattern, it broke it. He tapped on the date. A few weeks ago, he searched his messages again. Nothing obvious this time. No complaint about expenses, no purchase, no explanation, just a gap. Damon frowned, zooming in on the transaction details. Then his eyes caught on something else. A note, not a full description, just a short label tied to the withdrawal. He squinted, trying to read it clearly in the dim light. It wasn't a store, it wasn't a bill. It was a name, or at least part of one, and it didn't belong to his brother. Damon's breath slowed as he read it again. Because if that name was connected to the account, then this wasn't just about money. Someone else was involved. Damon stared at the name on the screen longer than he meant to. It didn't match anything familiar, no business, no service, no account he recognized from past statements. Just a partial name clipped as if it had been typed quickly or intentionally shortened. He read it again, slower this time. Then he copied it into his notes. If this was just his brother moving money around, it would have pointed back to something obvious. A bill, a transfer, a payment he could trace. But this felt different. This looked like a destination. He sat in the car a while longer, engine off, phone dimming in his hand. His mind ran through possibilities, trying to fit the name into something that made sense. A friend, a contractor, someone helping with expenses. But the amount didn't match that either. It was too clean, too deliberate, and it didn't explain why it stood alone, separate from the smaller, patterned withdrawals. Damon unlocked his phone again and searched the name online. Nothing clear came up at first, a few unrelated results, a couple of listings in other states. He added Ohio, still nothing useful. He leaned forward, elbows on the steering wheel, and exhaled slowly. This was the part he hated, when suspicion wasn't enough, but proof wasn't there yet. Still, he didn't close the search. He adjusted the spelling slightly, guessing at what the abbreviation might stand for. Added a first initial, dropped one letter. That's when something finally appeared, a small listing. Not a business, at least not a formal one, just a name tied to a registered account holder. No address, no clear description, but it was enough to confirm one thing: it was real. Damon felt a quiet shift inside him, not panic, not anger, focus, because now the question had changed. It wasn't just what his brother had been doing, it was who he'd been doing it with. The next morning, Damon stayed quiet at breakfast. His brother moved through the kitchen like nothing had happened the night before. Coffee poured, toast made, casual conversation about nothing that mattered. Their mother sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug she barely drank from. Damon watched the way she listened, the way she nodded at things that didn't require agreement, the way she avoided eye contact when either of them spoke too directly. It wasn't fear, not exactly, it was habit, and that made it harder to break. "You heading out today?" his brother asked, glancing over his shoulder. Later, Damon said. "Got a few things to take care of first." His brother nodded, not pressing, but Damon caught the quick look that followed, the kind of look that lingered just a second too long. He knew he was being watched now, carefully. That changed things. After breakfast, Damon waited until his brother stepped out to take a call in the garage. Then he moved. He found his mother in the living room, folding the same blanket over and over again. "Hey," he said gently. She looked up, startled for a moment, then relaxed. "Hey." Damon sat across from her, leaning forward slightly. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated, then nodded. "When was the last time you went to the bank yourself?" Her hands stilled. "I don't really go anymore," she said. "There's no need." "No need because you don't want to," Damon said carefully. "Or no need because someone told you not to?" She frowned slightly, as if the question didn't quite make sense. "He just handles it," she said. "It's easier." "For who?" She didn't answer. Damon let the silence sit for a moment, then reached into his bag and pulled out one of the printed statements. He didn't show her everything, not yet. Just one line. "This," he said quietly, sliding it toward her. "Do you recognize it?" She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer. Her eyes moved slowly across the numbers. "No," she said after a moment. "Should I?" "I don't know," Damon replied. "That's why I'm asking." She looked at it again, longer this time. Then she shook her head. "I don't remember this." Damon felt something tighten in his chest. "Do you remember signing anything recently?" he asked. "Anything about your accounts?" Her expression shifted. Not confusion this time. Uncertainty. "I signed some papers a while back," she said slowly. "He said it would make things simpler, so he could help with bills and things like that." "What kind of papers?" "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "Bank things. Maybe something about access." Damon nodded, keeping his face neutral. "Did anyone else explain them to you?" he asked. She shook her head. "He said it was standard," she said. "Just paperwork." Damon looked down at the statement again. Standard. The word echoed in his mind. That's how it always started. Not with something obvious, but with something small enough to ignore, something easy enough to trust. He folded the paper slowly and slid it back into his bag. "I'm going to check something," he said. She watched him, her eyes searching his face. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. Damon paused. He could lie. Tell her everything was fine. Tell her not to worry. That would be easier, but it would also be the same mistake he'd already made. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I'm going to find out." Her grip tightened around the mug. "Don't start a fight," she said softly. "Please." Damon nodded, even though he knew that might not be possible anymore. "I'll be careful," he said. It wasn't a promise. It was the best he could offer. By late afternoon, Damon was sitting inside a small branch office of the local bank. He hadn't come in asking for details he wasn't allowed to see. He knew better than that. Instead, he asked general questions about account access, about authorization, about how someone could legally manage another person's finances. The woman behind the desk was polite, cautious. Usually that would require a signed authorization, she explained. Sometimes a power of attorney, depending on how it's set up. And if someone had that, Damon asked, they could move money freely, within the scope of the authorization. Yes, she said. But there are still records. Every transaction is documented. Damon nodded. Would the account holder always be aware of those transactions? He asked. The woman hesitated slightly. Not necessarily, she said, especially if they're relying on someone else to manage things. Damon leaned back in his chair. That confirmed part of it, but not all of it. What about changes to contact information? He asked. Mailing addresses, notifications, that can be updated as well, she said, if the authorized person has access. Damon's jaw tightened slightly. Without the account holder noticing? It depends on the situation, she said carefully. But yes, it can happen. Damon thanked her and stood. As he walked out, the pieces started to shift again. This wasn't just about taking money. It was about controlling information. What his mother saw, what she didn't see, what she was allowed to know. Back in the car, Damon pulled out his phone again. He opened the photo of the transaction with the unfamiliar name. Then he opened the rest of the statements. He started comparing dates, not just the withdrawals, everything. That's when he noticed something else. Something he'd missed before, a change, not in the money, in the address. He zoomed in on the top of one of the statements, then another, then another. At some point in the past year, the mailing address had been updated. Subtly, just a slight variation, different enough to redirect where the statements went. Damon's stomach dropped, because he knew that address. He'd seen it before, just not here. It belonged to his brother, and if the statements weren't coming to their mother anymore, then she had never even had the chance to see what was happening. Damon didn't drive home right away. He stayed parked across the street from the house, engine off, watching the quiet rhythm of a place that suddenly didn't feel as simple as it used to. The porch light flicked on as evening settled in. A neighbor walked a dog. Nothing looked wrong. That was the problem. Everything looked normal, because the truth had been carefully hidden inside that normal. He checked the statements again on his phone, zooming in on the address change. Same account, same name. But at some point the mailing destination had shifted, not dramatically. Not in a way that would raise alarms, just enough. Enough to make sure his mother stopped seeing what was happening. Enough to make sure someone else saw it first. Damon ran a hand over his face and sat back in the seat. This wasn't careless, this was planned. And for the first time, the thought came in clearly, without hesitation. His brother hadn't just been taking money. He'd been managing what she was allowed to know. That crossed a line Damon couldn't explain away anymore. He stepped out of the car and walked back inside. The house felt quieter than before. His mother was in the kitchen, rinsing a plate that didn't need rinsing. The water ran longer than necessary. His brother was in the living room, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world had shifted. Damon stood there for a moment, watching him. Then he spoke. "Why is the bank sending Mom's statements to your address?" The question landed harder than he expected. His brother looked up slowly, not surprised, not defensive yet, just measured. "What are you talking about?" he said. Damon stepped into the room, phone already in his hand. He pulled up the image and held it out. "This," he said. "This address, it's yours." His brother glanced at it briefly, then leaned back in his chair. "Yeah," he said. So. Damon felt something tighten in his chest. "So she doesn't get them anymore," Damon said. "Why?" His brother shrugged slightly. "It was easier," he said. "She gets confused with paperwork. I handle it." Damon didn't look away. "You changed the address," he said, without telling her. "I didn't need to make a big deal out of it," his brother replied. "It's just mail." "Just mail," Damon repeated. Behind him, he could hear the water still running in the kitchen. His brother sighed like the conversation was already tiring. "Look, you don't live here," he said. "You don't see how things actually work day to day. Someone has to keep things organized." Damon took a step closer. "Organized," he said, "or controlled." That did it. The shift was small, but Damon saw it. A flicker of something sharper behind his brother's eyes. "Don't start twisting things," his brother said. "I'm the one here. I'm the one dealing with everything. Bills, appointments, problems. You drop in once in a while and suddenly you think you know what's going on." Damon didn't raise his voice. "Not yet. I know she didn't know her statement stopped coming," he said. "I know there are withdrawals she can't explain. And I know those statements are going to you. His brother leaned forward slightly. And, he said, that word again, and, like none of it mattered. Damon felt his control slipping, but he forced himself to hold it. And I want to know why, he said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then his brother exhaled slowly and leaned back again. Because it's easier, he said slower this time. Because she forgets things. Because she worries over stuff she doesn't need to worry about. I take care of it so she doesn't have to. Damon stared at him. That's not your decision to make, he said. It is if I'm the one responsible, his brother shot back. The words hung there, responsible. Damon let that sit for a second. Responsible doesn't mean you get to hide things, he said. His brother's jaw tightened. I'm not hiding anything, he said. Damon lifted the phone again. Then why didn't you tell her, he asked, and no answer. Just a look, a long one. From the kitchen, the water finally shut off. Damon turned slightly as his mother stepped into the doorway, drying her hands on a towel. What's going on? She asked quietly. Neither of them answered right away. Damon looked at her, then back at his brother. This was the moment, the one she had asked him to avoid. Don't start a fight. But it wasn't a fight anymore. It was something else. Mom, Damon said gently, did you know your bank statements were being sent somewhere else? She froze. Just for a second. Then she looked at his brother. That was all Damon needed to see. No, she said softly. His brother stood up. Okay, we're not doing this, he said. You're making it sound like something it's not. Damon didn't move. Then explain it, he said. His brother stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said. You don't understand how things work here. Then help me understand, Damon replied. Another pause, another calculation. Then his brother shook his head. I don't owe you an explanation, he said. The sentence landed harder than anything else, because it wasn't just defensive, it was revealing. Damon felt something settle inside him, a line, clear now. You owe her one, Damon said, nodding toward their mother. Silence. His brother looked at her, then back at Damon. Something shifted again. Not guilt, not exactly. More like irritation. Like this had become inconvenient. I handle things, he said finally. That's all there is to it. Damon watched him carefully. No, he said. That's not all. His brother didn't respond. But he didn't look away either. For a moment they just stood there, the space between them heavier than anything said out loud. Then Damon stepped back, not retreating, recalibrating. Fine, he said quietly. Then I'll figure it out myself. His brother's expression changed again, just slightly, a hint of something that hadn't been there before. Concern. Do what you want, he said. Just don't drag her into something she doesn't need. Damon glanced at his mother. She stood there, caught between them, her expression uncertain, her hands gripping the towel a little too tightly. She didn't look like someone who didn't need to know. She looked like someone who hadn't been allowed to. Damon turned and walked out of the room, not because he was done, because he wasn't ready to say everything yet. That would come later. Back in his room, he closed the door and sat down on the edge of the bed. He pulled out the statements again, then his notes. He started organizing them, dates, amounts, addresses, names, patterns. That's what he understood. That's what he trusted. And the more he looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a few bad decisions, it was a system, built over time, quiet, consistent, controlled. He flipped to the transaction with the unfamiliar name again. Then he opened his search results. There was something he hadn't clicked before, a secondary listing. Same name, different format. This time there was an address attached. Damon leaned forward. It wasn't a business. It wasn't an office. It was residential. And he recognized the street. Not because he'd been there. Because his brother had mentioned it once. Casually, in passing, like it didn't matter. Damon's pulse slowed. Not from calm. From clarity. Because now the question wasn't just where the money was going. It was why his brother had never mentioned this place again. And who was waiting there? Damon didn't wait until morning this time. He sat in his car with the engine running, staring at the address on his phone. The street was only 15 minutes away. Close enough to matter. Close enough that it hadn't been random. His brother hadn't just sent money into the void. He'd sent it somewhere specific, and Damon needed to see it for himself. The drive felt longer than it should have. Every red light dragged. Every turn felt deliberate, like he was crossing into something he couldn't undo once he saw it. By the time he reached the street, the sky had darkened into that flat gray blue that comes just before full night. The neighborhood was quiet, smaller houses, older ones, some well kept, others not. Nothing stood out at first. That made it worse. He slowed the car, checking the numbers on each mailbox until he found it. The address matched. Damon parked across the street and sat there for a moment, studying the house. It wasn't abandoned. There was a light on in the front room, a car in the driveway, curtains drawn just enough to suggest someone inside, but it didn't look like a business or an office or anything that explained regular transfers of money. It looked like someone's home. Damon stepped out slowly, his mind running through possibilities: a friend, a partner, someone his brother owed, or someone his brother was protecting. He walked up the driveway, each step heavier than the last. For a second, he considered turning around, waiting, gathering more proof, doing this the careful way, but then he thought about his mother standing in that kitchen, holding onto a mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. And he knocked. The sound echoed louder than expected. No answer at first, then movement inside. A shadow crossed the front window. The door opened just a few inches. A man stood there. Older than Damon expected. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Tired eyes. The kind that had seen too much or avoided too much. It was hard to tell which. "Yeah?" the man asked. Damon didn't speak right away. He hadn't expected this. "I'm looking for this name," Damon said finally, holding up his phone with the listing. The man glanced at it, then back at Damon. "That's me," he said. Damon felt his chest tighten. "Can we talk?" he asked. The man hesitated, long enough to matter. Then he opened the door a little wider. "Depends what this is about," he said. Damon stepped closer, lowering his voice. "It's about money being sent to you," he said, "from an account that doesn't belong to you." The man's expression changed, not shock, recognition. "Thus I think you should leave," the man said quietly. Damon didn't move. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I just need to understand what's going on." The man looked past him, toward the street, like he was checking for something. Or someone. "You shouldn't be here," he said again. "Why?" Damon asked. No answer, just tension. Damon took a breath, steadying himself. "My brother's been sending you money," he said, regularly. Small, one larger transfer." The man's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said. "But you need to stop." "Stop what?" Damon pressed. "Asking questions?" The man's eyes flickered again. This time, there was something else there. Not just caution, fear. Damon saw it. And that changed everything. "Look," Damon said, softer now. "If you're involved in something you don't want to be part of, I need to know that. Because right now, it looks like someone's taking advantage of my mother." The word landed. Mother. The man's shoulders shifted slightly. A reaction. Small, but real. "I'm not taking anything from anyone," he said. "Then why is the money coming here?" Damon asked. Silence. The man's grip tightened on the door. For a second, Damon thought he might just shut it, end the conversation. But he didn't. Instead, he exhaled slowly. "It's not what you think," he said. Damon leaned forward just slightly. "Then tell me what it is." Another pause. Longer this time. Then the man shook his head. "I can't," he said. The answer hit harder than a denial, because it wasn't one. Damon felt the shift again, from confusion to something sharper. "You can't," he repeated. "Or you won't?" The man didn't answer. But he didn't close the door either. That was enough. Damon reached into his jacket and pulled out a printed statement. He held it up. "This is documented," he said. "Dates, amounts, transfers. If I take this to the bank, or worse, someone else, it's going to raise questions." The man's face tightened. "I'm not threatening you," Damon added quickly. "I'm telling you this isn't going away." Still no response. Damon lowered the paper. "Whatever this is," he said, "it's bigger than just you. And if you stay quiet, you're part of it." That landed. The man looked down for a moment, then back up, and when he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower, more controlled. "You need to talk to your brother," he said. "I have," Damon replied. "He's not telling me the truth." The man nodded slightly, like he expected that. "Then you already know enough," he said. Damon shook his head. "No," he said. "I know something's wrong. That's not the same as knowing what." Another silence stretched between them. This one heavier, because both of them knew something had shifted. The man glanced over his shoulder, deeper into the house. Damon followed the movement with his eyes. He couldn't see much. Just a hallway, a shadow moving past the edge of a doorway. Someone else was inside. Watching, waiting, Damon's focus snapped back. "Who else is here?" he asked. The man stepped forward just enough to block the view. "No one you need to worry about," he said quickly. Too quickly. Damon felt it again. That instinct. The one that had been quiet before, easy to ignore, now it was louder, clearer. "You're not just holding money," Damon said slowly. "You're holding something else." The man's face went still. Damon took a step closer. "What did he tell you to say?" he asked. That did it. The man's control cracked just for a second, and in that second, Damon saw it. Not just fear, guilt, real heavy guilt. "I didn't ask for any of this," the man said quietly. Damon's pulse spiked. "Then why are you in it?" he demanded. The man looked at him like he was weighing something, a decision, one that had been sitting there for a long time. "You need to leave," he said again, "before this gets worse." Worse, Damon almost laughed, because it already was. He took a step back, but his eyes stayed locked on the man. "This isn't over," he said. The man nodded. "I know," he replied. Damon turned and walked back to his car. He didn't rush, didn't look back, but he could feel it, eyes on him, from the doorway, from inside the house. When he got back into the driver's seat, he didn't start the engine right away. He sat there, breathing slowly, replaying every second of that conversation. The man hadn't denied it, hadn't explained it, hadn't even tried to justify it. Just one thing: talk to your brother. Damon looked down at the statement in his hand, then back at the house. And that's when he realized something he hadn't seen before. This wasn't just about money. It never had been. Because whatever his brother was hiding, it was big enough that someone else was afraid to even say it out loud. Damon didn't go home that night. He drove aimlessly for a while, the quiet hum of the engine doing nothing to calm the noise in his head. Every piece of the puzzle felt heavier now, like it wasn't just about missing money anymore. The man's fear hadn't been about getting caught. It had been about something worse, something tied directly to his brother. By the time Damon pulled into a dimly lit parking lot outside a 24-hour diner, he had made a decision. If his brother wasn't telling the truth, Damon would stop asking him for it. He would start proving it. Inside the diner, the air smelled like burnt coffee and grease. Damon slid into a booth and spread out the statements again, flattening the creases with his palms. He lined them up by date, just like he did at work when shipments didn't match their logs. Patterns always showed up eventually. You just had to look long enough. He traced the withdrawals with his finger, then the transfers. Small amounts, steady rhythm. Then the larger ones, less frequent, but always tied to something. And now, one of those somethings had a face. The man hadn't denied receiving the money. He hadn't explained it either. But he had said one thing clearly: talk to your brother. Damon leaned back, exhaling slowly. That wasn't a deflection, it was a warning. The waitress dropped a mug of coffee in front of him, and he nodded his thanks without really seeing her. His focus had shifted somewhere else entirely. If his brother was involved in something bigger, then the money wasn't the starting point. It was the symptom. Damon pulled out his phone and scrolled through old messages. Texts from his brother. Short, practical, always in control. Handled it, already took care of that. Don't worry about it. At the time, Damon had been relieved. Now it felt like a script. He opened his call log next. His mother's number appeared regularly, but something about it stood out now. Most calls had been short, rushed, sometimes cut off early. And always, almost always, his brother had been nearby. Damon sat up straighter. That wasn't coincidence, that was control. He grabbed a napkin and started writing. Dates, calls, transfers. Cross-checking everything he could from memory and what little data he had. Then he stopped. There was something else. The mailing address. His brother had changed where things were being sent. Medical bills, notices, documents. That wasn't about convenience, that was about access. Damon reached for his phone again and searched for local records. Public listings, basic property information. It took a few minutes, but he found it. The house. It wasn't owned by the man he had spoken to. Damon stared at the screen. The listed owner was someone else entirely. A name he didn't recognize. His stomach tightened. That meant the man at the door wasn't just receiving money. He wasn't even in control of the place, which meant someone else was. Damon leaned back slowly, the weight of that realization settling in. The house wasn't the end of the trail. It was another layer. He looked at the name again, then typed it into a broader search. A few results came up, not many, but enough. A small business registration, recently filed, vague description, consulting services. The address matched the house. Damon frowned. That didn't fit. Nothing about that place looked like a business. And if it was, why was his brother sending personal funds there? Unless it wasn't personal. Unless it was being moved. Damon felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't just someone skimming money. This was someone routing it. He grabbed his phone again and scrolled back to the transaction details. Routing numbers. Partial account identifiers. Nothing complete, but enough to show movement. Different endpoints, different times, but always tied back to one thing. His brother's access. Damon pressed his fingers against his temples. He had been looking at this wrong. He thought the money was being taken. But what if it was being hidden? The thought hit hard enough to make him sit still. Because if that was true, then his brother wasn't just stealing. He was preparing for something. Damon's mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Debt. Legal trouble. Something tied to the VA benefits his mother received. That made him pause. He flipped back through the statements again, this time focusing on deposit dates. There it was, a pattern. The withdrawals often came shortly after deposits, not random, timed. Damon's chest tightened again. His brother knew exactly when money was coming in, and exactly how much he could move without drawing attention. This wasn't careless, it was calculated, a slow bleed. Damon stared at the numbers until they blurred. Then he made another decision. He couldn't do this alone, not anymore. He pulled up a contact he hadn't used in years, a former coworker now working in financial compliance. Not a close friend, but someone who knew how to read patterns like this. His thumb hovered over the call button. Then he hit it. It rang longer than expected. Just when he thought it would go to voicemail, the line clicked. "Yeah?" a tired voice answered. "Hey, it's Damon," he said. "We used to work scheduling together. I know it's late, but I need a favor." A pause. "Then what kind of favor?" Damon looked down at the papers spread across the table. "The kind where you tell me if something looks wrong," he said. Silence stretched for a moment. Then the voice sharpened. "How wrong?" Damon didn't hesitate. "Money moving in small amounts," he said. "Consistent timing, multiple endpoints, and someone controlling access who shouldn't be." Another pause. Longer this time. When the voice came back, it wasn't tired anymore. "Send me what you have," the man said. "But Damon, yeah? If it's what I think it is," he said slowly, "you're not just dealing with family problems." Damon's grip tightened on the phone. "What am I dealing with?" The answer didn't come right away. When it did, it landed heavier than anything else that night. "You might be looking at financial exploitation," the man said, "or something very close to it." Damon closed his eyes for a second. He already knew that, but hearing it out loud made it real. "And if it goes deeper?" Damon asked. Another pause. Then, quietly, "Then someone's been covering their tracks for a long time." Damon hung up a few minutes later, after sending over everything he had. He sat there in the diner, the coffee untouched, the papers still spread out in front of him. For the first time since this started, he felt something shift. Not confusion, not doubt, direction. But it came with a cost. Because now he knew this wasn't just about proving his brother wrong. It was about proving something much bigger. And if he was right, then confronting his brother wasn't going to fix it. It was going to break something that couldn't be put back together. Damon gathered the papers slowly, stacking them into a neat pile. Then he stopped, because there was one thing he hadn't checked, one place he hadn't looked. His mother's files. Not the bills, not the statements, the actual documents, the ones his brother had been handling. Damon's jaw tightened. If the money was being moved, then the paperwork would show how, and maybe, why. He stood up, leaving cash on the table, and headed for the door. This time he knew exactly where he was going. Back to the house, not to ask, to look. Because whatever his brother had done, he had left something behind. Something he didn't think anyone would notice. And Damon was done trusting what people said. He was going to trust what they tried to hide. By the time he reached the driveway again, the house was completely dark. No lights, no movement, just silence. Damon stepped out of the car, his pulse steady but heavy. He walked up to the door slower this time, more deliberate, because this wasn't a visit anymore. It was a line. And once he crossed it, there was no going back. He reached for the handle and realized something that made his stomach drop. The door wasn't locked. The door creaked open with almost no resistance. Damon froze on the threshold, his hand still on the handle, his instinct screaming that something about this was wrong. His brother was careful, controlling, the kind of person who checked locks twice, who made sure everything stayed exactly where he left it. So why wasn't this door locked? He stepped inside slowly, letting the door close behind him without a sound. The house felt different at night, smaller somehow. The quiet pressed in from every corner, thick and watchful. "Mom?" he called softly. No answer. He moved further in, his eyes adjusting to the dark. The living room was exactly as he'd left it earlier, neat, almost staged, nothing out of place. No signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, nothing obvious. That should have been reassuring. It wasn't, because if something had happened here, it hadn't been chaotic, it had been controlled. Damon exhaled slowly and headed down the hallway toward his mother's bedroom. The door was slightly open, a thin line of darkness spilling into the hall. He pushed it wider. Empty. The bed was made, the lamp unplugged. No sign that anyone had been there recently. His chest tightened. He turned back, moving quicker now, checking the kitchen, the back room, even the small laundry area. Every space felt untouched. Too clean, too quiet. Then he stopped. The hallway closet, it wasn't fully shut. A sliver of light reflected off something inside. Damon stepped closer and pulled it open. Inside, stacked on the top shelf, were several boxes, plain cardboard, labeled in his brother's handwriting. Documents, insurance, medical. Damon reached up and pulled the first one down. His pulse had started to pick up now, steady but loud in his ears. He set the box on the floor and opened it. Inside were folders, organized, tabbed, too organized. He flipped one open. Insurance policies, dates, coverage, adjustments. Nothing unusual at first glance. He moved to the next, medical records. His eyes skimmed the pages, searching for something, anything that didn't fit. Then he saw it. A change of contact. Primary contact, his brother, that made sense. But below that, secondary contact, removed. Damon frowned. His name should have been there. It had been there. He knew it. He flipped through more pages, appointment summaries, billing statements, notes, and again the same pattern. His brother listed as the only point of contact. Everywhere. Damon's jaw tightened. That wasn't just convenience. That was isolation. He reached for another folder, this one thicker, heavier. It was labeled simply, authorization. His fingers hesitated for a second before opening it. Inside were copies of legal documents, signatures, dates, power of attorney, financial, medical. His brother's name was printed clearly as the authorized agent. Damon's stomach dropped. He leaned closer, scanning the dates. They didn't match what his brother had told him. Some of these documents had been signed earlier than he thought. Much earlier. Before things had gotten bad. Before his mother had even started struggling, at least as far as Damon knew. He flipped to the signature page. His mother's name was there, but something about it felt off. The signature looked rushed, uneven, not quite like the steady, careful way she usually signed things. Damon stared at it longer than he meant to. Then he noticed something else. A witness signature, and below that a notary stamp. His eyes narrowed. The notary's name, he recognized it. Not personally, but from somewhere recent. Damon's mind raced, flipping through the last few days. Then it clicked. The address. The same one tied to the house where the money had been going. His breath caught. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a connection. Damon sat back slowly, the pieces starting to lock into place in a way he didn't like at all. His brother hadn't just taken control of the money, he had formalized it. Legally. And whoever was at that house, they had been part of it. Damon ran a hand over his face, trying to steady himself. This was bigger than he thought. Bigger than small withdrawals or even redirected funds. This was structure, planning, control built layer by layer until no one questioned it anymore. He reached back into the box, his movements sharper now, more urgent. There had to be more, and there was. At the bottom, beneath the folders, was a sealed envelope. No label, just his mother's name written on the front. Damon hesitated. This wasn't like the rest. This wasn't filed or categorized. It had been set aside, hidden but not destroyed. Which meant it mattered. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single document, older than the others. Different paper, different formatting. His eyes scanned the top line, last will and testament. Damon's heart skipped. He read fast now, his pulse climbing with every word. The distribution was simple, equal, fair. Both sons named nothing unusual until he reached the amendment, a later page attached separately. Signed, dated, his brother's name remained, but Damon's reduced, significantly not removed, but changed. Damon stared at the page, confusion turning into something sharper. This didn't match anything he'd been told. His brother had never mentioned a change. His mother hadn't either, and the date, it was recent enough that Damon should have known, unless he swallowed hard, unless she didn't understand what she signed, or worse, she hadn't been given a choice. Damon's grip tightened on the document. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control over everything. Her accounts, her medical decisions, even what happened after she was gone. He sat there on the floor, surrounded by boxes, the quiet of the house pressing in again. But this time it felt different, heavier, because now he understood something he hadn't before. His brother hadn't just taken advantage of the situation, he had built it, piece by piece, until there was nothing left that wasn't under his control. Damon exhaled slowly, forcing himself to think. If this was real, if these documents held up, then undoing this wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't going to be quick, and it definitely wasn't going to stay inside the family. He reached for his phone again, his mind already moving ahead, planning, connecting. But then, a sound. Soft, behind him. Damon froze. The house had been silent, completely, until now. He turned slowly, his pulse hammering. The hallway outside the closet was still dark, still empty. But the front door, it wasn't closed anymore. It was slightly open, and someone was standing in the doorway, watching him. The process didn't happen all at once. It started with a quiet meeting at the bank 3 days later, under harsh fluorescent lights that made everything feel more official than Damon expected. His mother sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap, her posture small but determined. She didn't look at his brother when he walked in. The bank representative spoke in careful, measured terms. There was no accusation in her tone, only procedure. Documents were reviewed, signatures were compared, dates were verified. Damon watched it unfold step by step, every detail laid out in a way that couldn't be argued with or brushed aside. His brother tried anyway. "It's not like that," he said, leaning forward, voice low but tense. "I was helping her. She needed someone to handle things." The representative didn't respond to that. She only pointed to the records, the withdrawals, the patterns, the inconsistencies, and then the authorization timeline. That was the part that shifted everything. The documents had been signed, yes, but the sequence didn't align with his mother's actual condition at the time. There were gaps, overlaps, points where her access had been reduced before it was necessary. It wasn't illegal on its face, but it was enough to trigger a review, and that review was enough to act. By the end of the meeting, his brother's access was frozen, not permanently yet, but immediately. It was the first real crack. Damon felt it the moment it happened, the shift in power, subtle but undeniable. His brother felt it too. The confidence drained from his posture, replaced by something sharper. Not regret, not yet. Just the realization that control was slipping. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, looking directly at Damon now. "You don't even live here. You have no idea what it's been like." Damon didn't raise his voice. "That doesn't make it yours," he said. The room went quiet. His mother didn't speak. But for the first time, she didn't look away either. That mattered more than anything else. The next few weeks moved slower but heavier. A formful review followed. The bank flagged the account activity. A financial advisor Damon had consulted helped organize those records into something clear and undeniable. Not emotional, not personal, just facts, dates, amounts, patterns. The story told itself once it was laid out properly. Small withdrawals over time, repeated, consistent, always just low enough to avoid attention until they weren't. The larger transfer Damon had found became the anchor point. It connected everything else, gave the smaller amounts context. It wasn't a mistake, it was a system. When the bank finalized its findings, they didn't accuse. They didn't need to. They simply removed his brother's authority entirely and required a structured review of the missing funds. Some of it could be justified. Expenses, bills, real costs, but not all of it. The rest became a repayment agreement, not dramatic, not immediate, but real. A portion of the money would be returned over time, formally documented, tracked, and most importantly, he no longer had access. Anywhere. That part was final. The fallout didn't stay contained. His brother's job had always depended on trust, financial oversight, small accounts, internal approvals. Nothing high profile, but enough that the moment questions surfaced, they couldn't be ignored. He wasn't fired overnight, but within weeks he was gone. Resigned, they called it. Damon knew better. So did everyone else. The family shifted too, not with shouting, not with dramatic confrontations, with distance. Calls stopped, invitations disappeared, conversations shortened into something polite and empty. It wasn't punishment. It was consequence. Trust once broken that way didn't come back. Not quickly, maybe not ever. Damon didn't push for anything more. There had been a moment, he couldn't deny it, when part of him had wanted to take it further, to press harder, to make it worse. But standing in that bank, watching his mother sit through it all, he understood something different. This wasn't about destroying his brother. It was about stopping him and giving her something back. That part mattered more. The house changed slowly after that. Not in big ways at first, small things. The fridge wasn't empty anymore. Bills were opened when they arrived, not stacked and ignored. The kitchen table started to look lived in again, not like a place where things just passed through. Damon stayed longer than he planned. Not because everything was fixed, because it wasn't. His mother hesitated over simple things at first, writing checks, making calls, even logging into her own account. Years of stepping back didn't reverse overnight, but she tried. That was the difference. One afternoon he sat across from her as she reviewed a statement on her own, slowly, carefully, asking questions when she needed to, but not handing it off. Her hands still shook a little. But they didn't stop. "I used to do all of this myself," she said quietly, almost to herself. Damon nodded. "I know." She looked up at him then, something clearer in her expression than he had seen in a long time. "I don't know why I stopped." He didn't answer right away. Because the truth wasn't simple. Control didn't always feel like control when it started. Sometimes it felt like help, like relief, like someone taking the weight off your shoulders. Until one day there was nothing left you were allowed to carry. "You trusted him," Damon said finally. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded. "So did you." That landed harder than anything else. Damon didn't argue, because she was right. He had trusted him, he had assumed. He had stayed just far enough away to not see what was happening clearly. And that had cost something. They both knew it, but they also knew something else now. It wasn't too late to change it. Months later, the house felt different again. Not quieter, lighter. Damon stood in the doorway one morning, watching his mother at the kitchen table, a notebook open in front of her, a calculator beside it. Her glasses perched low on her nose as she worked through numbers slowly but steadily. She didn't notice him at first. Didn't need to. She wasn't waiting for someone else to take over anymore. When she finally looked up, she smiled. Not out of habit. Not to reassure him, but because she meant it. Damon stepped inside, setting his keys down, and for the first time in a long time the house felt like it belonged to her again. Not managed, not controlled, owned. In every way that mattered. And as he watched her return to something that had always been hers, he understood the real cost of what had been taken, and the quiet strength it took to reclaim it. If you had to choose, would you hold on to family at any cost, or choose the truth, even if it changed everything?